Yeah, good afternoon. It's a pleasure being here and introducing to you the next topic of geopolitical tensions with all the gentlemen here on this side. I will introduce to you those. Please have a seat. Yeah, at very first, possibly a topic to have weather independent traveling would be also nice, because that's the reason why we have a little change in this session here. That's the reason why Michael, Klaus, and also Stefan cannot be here. So we are very happy to have here on the very left side Philippe from Liebherr Aerospace, Olivier, Senior Vice President Procurement Aerostructures from Airbus. Very spontaneous, and I would ask you for a small applause for the two gentlemen on this side, Richard Epps, who stepped in very spontaneously to this session, and also to Andreas from Volocopter, who just stepped up here again a second time to have this interesting topic here with those gentlemen. Thank you very much. You see also on the very left side the Slido.com barcode. Please use it, please address questions, please vote for the questions you are most interested in, so we can bring in those also during the session here. The first questions I give in general into the round, I would address to each one. Which specific challenge do you see at the moment as the most impactful on the stability of the aerospace industry supply chain? This question I would at first address to Olivier.
Thank you very much. Actually, Airbus is a truly global company. We have customers all over the world, and in order to be closer to our customer base, we have settled assembly operation on 3 continents. We also have a supply chain that is also still very much rooted in Europe, truly international and very global. So we are handling the business in a very global way. So to answer your question, so there is not a specific problem, but rather a series of specific problems that we are handling in parallel. I think, though, that this was, let's say, to a certain extent, sort of. So we had, let's say, anticipated, that the difficulties might come and that we would not be ever in a very stable and predictive or predictable world. So we have had the opportunity of testing full scale the relevance of the setup, but we are still, in a very shaky moment, still dealing with a lot of difficulties.
Okay, very, very challenging. Thanks for your answer at this point. The question I would like to address to Andreas from Volocopter, because it's pretty interesting. On one side, regarding the supply chain, as we know, Airbus has a huge supply chain. Volocopter is there more early in the maturity level, so also the question regarding the challenge you see currently in general from your perspective, which would you name here at this point?
Yeah, I'm a bit like what Olivier said. There is not one challenge which fits all. I guess the main subject we are all suffering from is to have the right qualified resources available in order to help us to build up the supply chain. And this is for sure at the OEM in order to clearly define what we need. Because here as well, many companies in the past have thought, okay, this is not our core business, we source it out. And by this, we have lost completely the ability to define what we really need. I guess here it is important to build up this capability again at the OEMs, let's say, in order to then establish something which is well done from the architecture point of view in order to build a new product, but then as well to have the right specialists available in terms of qualification, but in terms of quantity as well. This is for me the biggest challenge, because everything what we are doing is linked to the capability and availability of people.
And that's good that we know it, because then you have a fair chance to act on this. So very interesting now to give this question to Philippe from Liebherr Aerospace as a supplier, tier 1 supplier, to get your perspective on this.
Thank you, Stefan. Yes, Liebherr is a family-owned company, and for us, a core value clearly is reliability. So we are a reliable partner not only to our customers, suppliers, but also the regions that we are active in. And today, with all the interruptions and the challenges that we see politically, that we see as a humankind, it becomes even harder for us to be reliable for all these partners that we are interacting with. And that's a huge challenge that we need to have on our radar, that we need to mitigate in the risks. And of course, that also requires a lot of investments.
Exactly.
So this is a big challenge for us. And the teams are working on that forcefully.
Clearly, great. And then we have a very nice insight here from Richard, who is from Counterpoint, which is an organization which could provide market intelligence from the aerospace industry. So let's say a kind of neutral function here in this round. So what is your perspective from the, let's say, big picture of the industry at this point?
Okay, well, I think it's instructive to think about where we are now compared to where we are in 2019 before the pandemic struck. And the striking thing, I think, is that we're struggling to get back to where we were at 2019 in terms of production levels. And so you have to ask yourself what has changed over this period. And for me, the biggest change is that we've lost a significant part of the workforce. We already had a workforce that was aging, like me, baby boomers, and a lot of people my age have left the industry permanently. And I think that's a sort of common thread. I mean, clearly there's been a huge amount of disruption. I think that's the big thing that's changed from where we were in 2019 to where we are now, is what I think.
Okay, pretty good. Thank you. Then we had a little warm up here at this point. So there the first question come up, but I first want to stick here on my papers at very first. So Olivier, I would like to know what are your challenges in regard of producing, sourcing abroad, for example, with China, in China. What are the tactics to face those challenges from your perspective to handle this?
So the challenge is to be in a condition to have operations continuity, whatever is happening. And during the COVID, so we have tested the setup, which consists of having a very strong and a multifunctional team based in the countries in where we have, let's say, a significant presence, so as to ensure that locally the people can organize themselves and drive the business as appropriate. So it's been very helpful. So we speak about Asia, so be it in China or in India, the same in North America, and that, let's say, local empowerment of the team has been very, very helpful. I think that then, and it's part of, let's say, our main principle in terms of procurement and sourcing strategies. So we are applying a systematic de-risking of our supplies. So we very seldom have we, let's say, single sources, or are we dependent, so as less as we can, of a single point of failure. This is also what has helped us go through the difficulties, and we are, also learning from past difficulties. We've been caught as, let's say, other aircraft manufacturers were by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and with the subsequent consequences on titanium provisioning. So it happened that in 2014 we have been already faced with a type of situation, and out of that, so we are determined that building up significant stock to protect ourselves was the way to go. And in 2022, so we have benefited from that decision that was made 8 years before. And although we have not significantly tapped into that protection stock, so it has been, let's say, very helpful to, let's say, have a bit of time to implement backup solutions.
Yeah, which is pretty good. You just gave a command in your answer where, when I'm in the audience, I would be interested in to learn. You mentioned you learn from your experience how you handle it. How do you do it in a structured way, let's say, to learn from the incidents which happens, to do it the next time better? Because when the next time there is a COVID or different happenings there, how do you ensure that, let's say, a quite big organization like Airbus is, that for the next time you're even better prepared? That would be interesting from my point of view.
So we are running a very structured and thorough risk management process, which is applied, for each of the program, but as well by each of the functions. So we are doing, a cross-check to ensure that we have the right coverage. Out of that, so we are deriving action plans, so which we are monitoring as well. So it cannot be 100% safe, but in most of the cases, so it's helping us, build on the experience and do better the next time.
That's very interesting. Thank you at this point. I would be interested from Andreas at this point to know, while you're in Volocopter in a stage where you're, again, ramping up the supply chain, how do you take experience from your former jobs, from the team, to prepare yourself for the future happenings here, that you won't get harmed the next time if COVID-2 came around, or things like Ukraine war, something happenings, that you're there a bit better prepared? Do you take some lessons learned while you're ramping up your structure and your supply chain at this point?
Yeah, for sure, this is our intention to do, but as you correctly said, we are just building up our supply chain. And, when you are a startup, let's say there's a lot of knocking on the door, but it's not suppliers knocking on your door. You have to knock on the door of the supplier in order to attract them to step into your business. So the item, I guess, has a bit changed over the time. We have found good partners where we are working with, which have experience, and they themselves have their risk management committee in place, and they are working on the subjects themselves. For us, I guess one of the key items is to focus on our unique selling points. So what is important for us, and not to, let's say, follow up every horse which is available to ride on. We are just focusing on where it makes sense to do multi-sourcing, where it makes sense to generate inventory. For sure, within the financial limits we have. Consignment stock is something where we try to attract our suppliers to work with us, because it's always to have the right parts at the right moment in time available, especially when you are executing a ramp up the first time, is something which is interesting. For sure, this is also something which goes along with financial models which are attractive. So I guess the main subject is to understand what is the financial health you have in the system, what means you can apply in order to, let's say, be at the limits, what you can afford in terms of inventory, and for sure communication. And I guess very important is that it is not a natural customer-supplier relation. I prefer to talk about partners.
Yeah.
And my usual saying is that if I'm thinking, let's say, all the others are thinking with me, so what I say to my teams as well, the boat does not sink where the hole is in the boat. Everybody has to look at it, and we all have to work together, and that's why communication is so key between us in order to, let's say, make up early warning and have some predictive measures in place in order to. I hope that COVID is never coming back, and I hope that also everything what is linked to war in the world is going to finish very quickly and very soon. But however, there are other items which we cannot control, and here I guess there are means in place, and with communication we can manage that.
One little additional question at this point. You mentioned communication is key for you. In our industry, as we know, we have quite, let's say, small industry, very good connected. We count on the relation between people. On the other side, we talk about digitalization. So when you talk about communication, it could happen on one side face-to-face via people, which take probably some more time. On the other side, on a high technological way, to do it digital in a more just-in-time approach. What would you prefer, which approach to enter the future in this regard? More a digital way, a little bit less human being in interaction, or more to take the phone and to call?
I guess the basis for all communication is trust. Yeah, and personal relation with between people is always a good subject. And to be honest, because what many times is done between OEMs and suppliers is that the OEM does not want to say if he has a difficulty in the ramp up, he has to adapt the rates. And then he needs to be honest that, sorry guys, we will not be as quick as we thought. Or here is something where we have to take a decision where maybe we need 5 units more or 10 units more or whatsoever. But this is based on trust and not based on, let's say, securing that our share prices are at the right level. Because at the end, it will pay back for all of us. Also, if the share price gets a temporary little hit, But the point is that we need to trust each other. And that's very important. And factual data you can exchange by digital means, no doubt.
Exactly.
But trust mainly is between people and to be considered as honest and reliable. That's important.
Great. Thank you very much for this point. For Philippe, how does Liebherr react on the current supply chain disruptions whilst fulfilling at the same time the request for increased competitiveness and technical innovation, which could be a constraint?
Yes, absolutely. It's a very interesting environment that we are in. As I said before, of course, as Liebherr being reliable, we have a supply chain very much organized around our factories. So this is one of the, let's say, even potentials that also our customers point out. You need to be more global, you need to source more in best cost countries, and yes, we are committed to that, and we do that. And as you know, we are in a highly specialized industry that requires a lot of investment, knowledge transfer, time, reliability, trust, good communication.
Exactly.
However, if situations happen like they did in Ukraine and Russia, unfortunately, not only it's tragic for the humankind, but also it interrupts our supply chain entirely, you know.
Entirely.
And so what we do, we need to, of course, go by the traditional means, double, triple source. Again, this requires quite high investments. And on the other hand, use, of course, our trust basis that we have developed with our partners, but also digital means to get better transparency, be more integrated in the system. And again, for us, it was an advantage that we have industrialized a lot of our products completely. So we can always bring product back, which is again coming at the cost in capacity, cost in euros and dollar.
Exactly.
But also it gives certain reliability to us. And so we have to find a balance that is acceptable for our customers, that's acceptable for us, and eventually creates a commercial sustainable model, right? Because we will have to invest in new technology. We will have to invest in new suppliers that we build up. We will have to invest in new factories all over the world. So it eventually needs to be a model that everybody participates and that is sustainable for everybody.
Okay. So also what you just mentioned in the end, there are some in some conversations I recognize that somebody is talking about deglobalization, to go back from globalization. If you talk about building up new plants or new activities abroad, then it's not the case that you assume it will be a target to go back to a local business, so to deglobalize, right?
No, we don't. We believe, of course, in globalization in the sense. We believe also in humankind finding ways to not be in war or be in conflicts. However, the reality is there will be always tensions. So our group of companies with all of our products is globally represented on every continent. We produce every discipline, production, all other disciplines, we have them on all continents. So this is, of course, a big chance also for us, also for the aerospace division, to use this network further. And yes, you take some risks, and certainly we are committed to the regions, as I said before, that we have invested in, and we will continue to do that. However, we have to really monitor closely the situations in those countries, situations that we face entirely as an industry, and develop models together how we can better make this a sustainable model and better integrate it and have a good view on the situations so that we can act relatively fast.
That's a pretty good approach. Richard, when I look to Slido, I want to enter the second question with which probably you could answer very well. The geopolitical environment is changing, as we recognize and we feel here. Is the industry moving towards a more friend-shoring situation? What is your perspective from your, let's say, more general market intelligence perspective? I think that could be a good one for you.
Yeah, yes, friend-shoring is not a term I heard before, but it's obvious what it means. And I think the answer is yes, it is actually. I think the probably the Boeing 787 program was the sort of high watermark of the globalized supply chain, subcontracting as much as possible, both in terms of technology and actual procurement. And I think since then we've seen a bit of a move back from that to a bit more onshoring. And I think that's been most noticeable in aerostructures, where Boeing, clearly for the 777X wing, is now doing that in Seattle rather than in Japan, or there's still quite a lot being made in Japan, but it's actually assembling the wing and doing the main wing. And also aerostructures, Airbus aerostructures, as a significant amount of vertical integration with the formation of Airbus Atlantic and Airbus Aerostructures. And Gulfstream is another example of a company that's bringing more aerostructures back in-house. So I think that is a trend. But on the other hand, as has been said, there's still a need to have a global supply chain, both from the point of view of sort of commercially, because that's where the products are sold, so you need to have a global industry, and also a best cost sourcing. So it's a balance as always, but I think there is more of a trend to more vertical integration by the aircraft manufacturers, and also the big tier ones are doing the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Pretty good, thank you. Thanks for this. I have seen also a question which could go to Airbus. Airbus stated that it will wean itself off of Russian titanium. Yet today it remains very dependent on it. Is there a plan to fulfill its promise? The question goes to Olivier, obviously.
Okay, actually we have established alternate sources to Russian titanium. As of today, formally speaking, there is no sanction banning from importing Russian titanium for civil use, but we are fully ready, whenever that, let's say, a regulation would come into place to work, and we have started working with other sources in other parts of the world. So it's reality, so we are, let's say, virtually independent, if need be, from Russian titanium.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much. I see also a very interesting one regarding the Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtgesetz. I would look to Andreas into the direction, because as you mentioned, you ramp up the supply chain. Probably it's pretty interesting how you handle it, because from my point of view, to adapt an existing situation is a different thing when you build it up, and build it up probably directly at first, directly right. So that would be interesting probably to address to Andreas.
Yeah, it's for sure, and it's not only for a startup who's building up something, it's for all of us a major challenge, but something which we have to say from Volocopter side, we are fully support, because this is, let's say, a working ethics, and we have to support this. So it's very important that we, let's say, get it right in the beginning. How do we do it? When those regularization are fully, let's say, applied on us, for sure, we will go like everyone, like, for example, for our batteries, to see how the mining is done for the raw material we are using in our battery cells or in any other of the components we have, that's for sure. But the problem in the geopolitical situation which we have, and this is, let's say, Lieferketten-Sorgfaltsgesetz, this is something which we have in Germany, and we are very well established with rules and requirements, like Andre said this morning as well in his panel, that we have many items we have to follow. Others do not have this. But we have to look as well that our market is global. Exactly. And we have to adapt, let's say, to the requirements which are in the individual countries. Mm. Yeah, so some of the materials we are using, and not only in the eVTOL business, but everywhere, is material for our electronic components, which are at the moment, to a big extent, coming from China. Mm-hmm. So this means talking to the people there about Lieferketten-Sorgfaltsgesetz is a bit difficult, because the question you get back is, do you want it or not? Mm-hmm. So the point is, how can we manage this together? And what is the political support we can get into this in order to stay competitive in our market? Because this is a key subject at the end. We are a bit between, let's say, two millstones, or between a rock and a hard place, like the British say. So the point here is really how can we get support from the politics in order to support our business on this subject, not by getting additional requirements, but also giving us a hint how we can cope with it in the future.
Exactly, because just to think it from my perspective a bit further, you mentioned the battery, how the materials are gained. etc. The situation. If you have in your supply chain a situation which you cannot accept, you probably, as Volocopter, cannot change it. So again, that's the point probably where to get the political perspective inside for help, but also probably is there a potential to get the industry together who else have similar situations to have a bigger leverage to give into supply chain that it's sourced in a more suitable way, to say it this way, you know?
Yeah, here as well, I understand your question very well, but the levers we have on this one is quite limited. If it is raw material, it is existing somewhere. We need to find out new sources for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially in the raw material which are used for electronic components, for batteries, battery cells in the future. What is done at the moment by the Scandinavian countries is something which is very interesting for us. Canada is an area which is very important for us. But on the other side, we need to secure that we do business with the Chinese as well, because it is one of the biggest markets we have. So the story is, again, like we say in German, which death are you going to die?
Exactly.
And the point is, if you have, how to say, working ethics and moral requirements, let's say, for yourself, you cannot just push it overboard and do, let's say, like nothing is existing. So this is something, I guess, which is important. And for a startup and for somebody who is establishing at the moment a new business, it is very important that you give yourself some clear rules, some do's and don'ts, which you respect then, and not just that business is, let's say, something for which you throw everything overboard and just try to optimize your gain.
Exactly. Thank you very much. I have another question for Philippe. On the very right side. From my side, on your very left side, sorry for that. What role do existing and upcoming regulations play in your organization, the strategic outlook? Are they rather an opportunity or more a threat?
So I'd like to go back to the Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz, which is already nearly breaking my tongue to say it. And the problem is, this is a German word, and you can do comedy about it because it's so long and the way we build it. Yeah. The problem is, it's a German word, and there is a lack of integration of these rules. So the governing bodies, as well as the industry, needs to find ways to integrate such absolutely necessary laws and make sure that those are standardized. You can't just have one in Germany, one in France, one in Brazil, and then one in the EU, then one in the US. This will drive cost to a level that is not bearable, and it will also occupy our people. Of course, there will be digital solutions for that, but still it occupies our people. So we fully support those. We are prepared for it, but we would like that this is more integrated. And that applies to politicians and to the governing body and to our industry.
That's great. As you have mentioned, you are prepared for this. What have you done to be prepared? Because probably, I assume that a couple of ladies and gentlemen here in the round would be interested to know how to get to that stage, being prepared for that.
Some of the digital solutions that we have, of course, will easily answer to all the questions and characteristics. Then, like Andreas said, we have, of course, ethics that we live by. I mean, you go to a little company somewhere, one of our suppliers, they don't know much about this law maybe, but they have lived by these rules forever. Oh. That's why they are there, right? Now you just have to find a way to report on it and to not do this on every instance again, but you need to integrate it into a system so that you can answer to those requests quickly. So sometimes, as I said, we have systems that deliver the data. Yeah. And of course, we are close with our suppliers. We audit them, we monitor them, we know them. So we have all information and intelligence in place.
Yeah, thank you. I just read the top question here with 5 votes. So let's have a look at this one. With the supply chain crisis, is it the right moment to develop more and more repair solutions to keep using the parts longer instead of new buy, even if this means losing sales revenue for OEM, not mentioning the sustainability aspects, which I would like to address to Olivier.
Well, so I don't think this is a realistic proposal. I don't know if any airline would accept to, let's say, to get delivery of an airplane that would be made of recycled parts or reused parts. So, and it was discussed this morning, so we paid a great deal of, let's say, the dismantlement of the aircraft at the end of its life, and we ensure that we can reuse as much as we can the materials that are, let's say, taken off that aircraft, but in a recycling process, and not to be reused in, let's say, for the purpose of assembling a new aircraft.
Okay, thank you. Richard, I would like to address the same question to you because of your market intelligence perspective. I'm pretty interested, and also the audience, what's your perspective on this?
Well, I think certainly in the aftermarket, used serviceable material is a very important source of parts, and it's clearly very well controlled. And certainly the engine OEMs are getting involved in the used serviceable material market. So I think in the aftermarket it is very important, and there's a whole sort of infrastructure of rotable parts in the aftermarket. So I think absolutely it is an important thing. And as we've heard earlier, right now in the engine world, there's a real shortage of parts, and that's affecting both aircraft on the ground and also production of new engines. So I think there's already a lot of effort into repairing parts and keeping used serviceable parts in circulation. So I think it's already being done. It's clearly the right thing to do. But I agree, it's not appropriate for new aircraft. When you get a new aircraft, you want it all new rather than a few old bits on it.
So I could also, as you mentioned, the engine, I could imagine that this could have an effect also on which products we talk. When they're high complex, obviously some repairs make sense. If they're not that complex, probably it's a question, again, of money. What can it cost the repair instead of just to change it? You know, I think that's, it seems that you agree all the time, a question of costs. So very interesting here at this point. From the perspective, I have here also the question for you four gents regarding ESG, so sustainability again. If there is the really ESG transparency in this field, does it pose as a competitive risk due to the increased attention for the stakeholders at this point, or is it really helping? So it seems to be a little bit tricky to act on this. So that would be interesting also to know from your side. Probably I start at very first on my side with Andreas.
That's a difficult question for let's say, for a startup to talk about that. But I guess it's a bit linked to the question you had before in terms of reuse of material. We had the discussion this morning in the panel about material passports, about reuse of material, about recycling and what you can recycle, how, and what is the second use for parts and so on. And there have been some very, very good comments by the colleagues this morning already, which are already in the business and doing a lot for this. But what is important is that it is something which will cost money. And the willingness to invest into this, I guess, needs to be a bit more developed, because we have I come again to the working ethics point. We have to do something on this, because if we do not invest in the subject and taking our resources with a necessary level of care, sustainability is just another lip service, which not only the aviation industry, but all the other industries are using as well a lot, because it's a sales argument and we are green. But if you are going then a bit more depth and drill into the subjects, you find quickly out that there's nothing done. They try to cover everything with additional money, and that's it. And real measures are important on this one. This is very important.
So it's not happening right now, real measures. That's
not to the extent it needs to be, from my perspective.
That would be interesting to address this to Philippe for LEAP Aerospace, because also a quite big organization with a lot of facilities and so on. How do you measure this field in comparison with to see it also? How important is it for you to go there into detail? Also by reflecting a bit in back mind that for the geopolitical tensions you have also other things to manage. So how do you balance these topics out?
Obviously, they're very, very important for us. Measurability is critical. You need to establish the right measures. You need to have a certain realism in this whole discussion as well, which is sometimes tricky because, of course, in the media there's a clear need and a discussion ongoing that we all understand, we all participate, but certain topics are a little polemic, and eventually we have to, in the industry, but together with all the players that are involved in that discussion, understand what are the targets that are achievable, how do we measure them, and what do we need to actually achieve the targets and to get there. So for us, it's critical, it's important. We invest in this area a lot. Exactly. And it's important to make it transparent and obvious to our customers, to the public, what we do and what we can achieve together.
As you deal with Airbus, I see Olivier is nicking, so agreeing, so you collaborate on this quite close to get this in place. Let's say if I look at you to get it in a proper way into the supply chain in regard of looking at you two here, right? That's great.
Yes, actually, so we are applying, the same, let's say, expectations, same standards to our supply chain, wherever the suppliers are coming from. So we pay a great attention to let's say, the ESG aspect. So be it in terms of quality of and safety of the workplace. And so we are also deploying a so-called code of conduct, so which is, let's say, opposed to any of our suppliers. And this is, as well a requirement that we encourage them to cascade to their own supply chain. So we are having that type of screening across the entirety of our supply chain, regardless of where we are. I think that in terms of ESG, so what is also important to think is that with the globalization of our supply chain, so we are paying a lot of attention in order to avoid unnecessary motion of material and parts around the world. And from that standpoint, developing progressively, it will not be done overnight. And I said it, so we still have a supply chain, so which is, let's say, heavily rooted in Europe. But we tend to develop so-called regional supply chains, so as to ensure that we can source locally with a proper level of qualification, obviously, what is needed to have operation in the country, so as to limit, the CO2 footprint and have as well, let's say, a sustainable approach of globalization.
Thank you very much. I just see the time is a bit moving. We have some time left, which is good. Exactly, the question at the very top, how will the China-Taiwan conflict affect the aviation industry worldwide? I think that's a great question for Richard at this point.
Well, I'd just like to say it's a good thing it's not a conflict at the moment, because it's a...
Exactly.
But clearly there are tensions, and I think we're talking about geopolitical risks, and it's a matter of evaluating the risks, because if you look back, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was well telegraphed in advance, and there was the annexation of Crimea. So these things don't happen completely out of the blue. And similarly, if you go back to the Arab Spring, which was obviously a much lesser event, but did impact supply chains, particularly in Tunisia. So they're always telegraphed in advance, and I guess there's no sort of pat answer, but it's just a matter of seeing the risk and then taking mitigation measures, so that if the worst comes to the worst, you are to some extent prepared. But I think it'd be true to say if China did invade Taiwan, it would be a real black swan event, and the industry would be another sort of COVID or 9/11. So let's hope it doesn't happen. But I think the thing to do is to be aware and take risk and take mitigation actions well in advance.
Exactly. Thanks a lot for answering this. Is there one more question I see there?
Maybe I can add something to this question, which was just answered by Richard.
Please.
I guess not only for the aviation industry, but for the entire industry, this, if it is developing to a conflict, it will be a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Because we are depending so much, especially in the electronic building segment, from what is produced in China mainland, but also in Taiwan. that, let's say, if the supply of goods for our products is not coming, and we have seen this already in the COVID crisis, that due to logistic issues, things have not arrived on quality, on time, where they should be, where they are requested. I guess it will be a major hit for the entire industry, and not only aviation, everywhere. Automotive, aviation, everything.
Everything
So
basically.
it is something, let's say, which needs to be avoided, and all what we can do, I guess, the entire world has to contribute that this is not becoming conflict.
Thank you
if I
very
may.
much. Then I have a question again for all of you four gentlemen here in the front, because we are entering almost to the end. I would like to start at the end with Philippe. What would you recommend to the audience that should they take at heart to face the geopolitical tensions, what they could do, should do? What would you explicitly at the end propose to the audience to do better in future?
First of all, it's very important that we have this, communication with each other. Then I think everyone should be open to really integrate more. Obviously, there's always a bit of a challenge in terms of how you secure your business model and your IP, of course. That goes without saying that everyone is concerned about it. However, to sell your IP and to have an existing business model, you need to be able to interact globally. So I think that should be the mindset for everyone. Get closer to each other, think about models using new technology, but also using communication and human skills to be aligned, to be more integrated, and to develop models that work sustainably, also for a longer term period. And you can't just measure solely by the return on the investment, in the sense by euro or US dollar or whatever currency you're using. There is more to it. There's, of course, the CO2 footprint, but there's, again, also reliability. And this comes at a cost, clearly.
Exactly.
However, if your supply chain is dying, or you lose suppliers, or you lose production sites, the cost is much greater. As we all know, we just learned it in the past years again. So it's critical, of course, to be commercially competitive, but also be focused on a long-term partnership.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Olivier?
I would say that Murphy's Law still applies, and from that standpoint, so we have to be prepared, and we have to anticipate, the difficulties we might face. So I concur with Philippe. So this is not an exercise you can do, let's say, in a closed circle in your own office. So you have, let's say, to discuss with your supply chain to understand what could jeopardize their business. So to do so, you have to be close. Most of the cases, so it's needed to have, let's say, teams that are close to the supply chain to investigate, to ensure that everything is in place, to cope with the uncertainty. So this is absolutely needed in the present world. So I think that we can nevertheless develop the business. So we are learned from the experience. This is what was said, and we are moving forward, expanding our supply chain. So there is, in my view, let's say, a path for the growth in that setup.
Thank you very much. Richard,
Okay,
your big picture.
I think there's no substitute for sort of old-fashioned things like having buffer stocks, and if you can have dual sources, and that sort of introduces true resilience. I mean, clearly you need to have good communication, data, and all the stuff we've been talking about. But I think those sort of basic things produce resilience, I think.
Thank you very much. Andreas?
I guess, let's say, and Philip said it very well, moving together, acting as a team, communication, exchange, and supporting each other. I guess this is the only solution by which you may cope with geopolitical tensions, because they can develop out of the blue. And this story, let's say, you can apply the usual measures, and Richard mentioned it already, you can have buffer stock, but at the end it is always a specific situation which is rising from the problems we see out of the geopolitical environment. And here, I guess, again, I come back to the story of trust and working together, helping each other if somebody is running out of material, and if there's enough in the system available, but maybe at another place, that there is really support offered and that we are really exchanging a bit more on what is on stock in every area and not trying to use this only as a competitive advantage in order to see that others are dying and you, as you have, let's say, your inventory at the right point, you can survive. If we want to cope with geopolitical problems, I guess the industry has to move closer together on the subject. My personal opinion, and I guess this is the only way out on this.
I really appreciate what I have heard here, because on one side, we have heard about a buffer stock, which could help nicely, but the main outcome from my side is, where I'm very happy about is to work close together, to talk to each other, to collaborate, which reflecting on the last 2 days we had here. So I really appreciate the discussions in the front of here, to have you 4 gents here to discuss this and share it with the audience. Highly appreciate it, because that brings us here more closer together, that brings us closer to the audience. Thanks a lot. The last minute is running on our side in the top here, to the possibility of those 2 days to come together, to collaborate, to partner, to get introduced to new contacts, and then really to come together and proceed with the discussions even after tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being here, and thanks a lot for listening. Highly appreciated. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.